Okay, so I recognize that when the pandemic hit, governments all over the world were in this scurry to get help out the door. And of course, the government in Canada was no exception. So there was this flurry of activity and money started rolling. But most governments would have the sophistication to put safeguards in place in order to prevent fraud. Not so in Canada. So the government rolled out hundreds of millions, then billions of dollars without so much as a measure of accountability. In recent months, we've learned that because there were not these safeguards in place, there was actually money that ended up going into the hands of fraudsters and organized crime groups. This is a problem. It's been reported that about 500 million in double payments were made before any fixes were done or taken care of at the CRA. Now, I'm not saying that every single one of those double payments was fraud. Some of them were probably innocent mistakes, but nevertheless, a red flag should have gone up for someone, I would hope, within the CRA to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't be rolling out extra money here, or hey, that's actually an organized crime group, or hey, that's an individual who's actually a criminal. Maybe we shouldn't be sending them money. But none of that happened. Somehow, hundreds of millions of dollars went out the door without so much as a second glance from the CRA. So almost no accountability with regard to the spending that rolled out in the form of COVID benefits. Now, we're talking about your money. We're talking about taxpayer dollars that went out in order to help support people through the COVID pandemic. Now, it might be the right thing to do to help people through a difficult time, but not if there isn't sophisticated safeguards in place. So what should be the appropriate response now that we have found out that this happened? Well, naturally, an audit should be done. An audit. Now, luckily, we have someone who does that here in Canada, the Auditor General. So the other day at committee, yesterday, my colleague asked about this. Why isn't an audit being done? And the Auditor General said, well, don't worry, we will get to it. And he said, Pierre Poilievre said, well, when? And she said, well, no worries, it'll be done in 2023. What? 2023? That's for sure a year away, maybe even up to 2 years away. And so the question should be then, well, what's the reason for the delay? Why? The Auditor General responded by saying this was necessary because the CRA is in such chaos that she doesn't have access to the necessary paperwork. So she doesn't have the documents needed to hold the government accountable. It's absurd. It's absurd. So these documents don't exist. Therefore, the Auditor General won't do the audit or the investigation that is necessary. Meanwhile, as if that wasn't absurd enough, the Liberal government is right now, today, as we speak, asking for another $7.4 billion in new pandemic spending. $7.4 billion that are going to come from taxpayers and be spent on new COVID benefits that will be created for those who need them. Now, what's to say that the same thing isn't going to continue to happen? That fraudsters or criminals aren't going to continue to be able to access this money? This cannot be allowed to happen. We cannot continue to allow the government to dole out money without any accountability whatsoever. And we certainly cannot wait until 2023 before action is taken. I mean, imagine if you were a business. Imagine if you were a business and you were caught in potentially fraudulent behavior. And then you were just like, hey, don't worry, CRA, I'm going to pull my paperwork together. Just give me a couple years. As if the CRA would grant a few years for that organization or that business to pull itself together. So why would the Auditor General be okay with just giving this extra time? No, we need an audit now. The government cannot reasonably expect us as the opposition to sign off on $7.4 billion in new spending if the government is not willing to be held accountable, if the Auditor General will not do her job in a timely fashion. It's wrong. So, if you agree with me, I'm asking you to take action. I'm asking you to give the Auditor General a call. It'll take 1 minute of your time, ask her to speed up the process and to hold this government accountable. The number's on the screen. Thanks.